So again, this PowerPoint is prepared by Miss Desiree Jane or Medino. So I was just using her PowerPoint presentation. So we'll start with an example, no, before knowing the topic for this day. So a plane has a GPS navigation system that gives the coordinates and determines the distance it travels. If the plane had already passed halfway through its flight distance, it's better to continue flying towards its final destination. If not, then turn back. So, ana siya no. So, ang usa ka distance kay it will also help us in identifying kung kanus ata mo balik o kanus ata magpadayon sa ato paglakaw. No, so aside from this example sa plane, no, it would also be better nakabaluta. No, like for example, our home is in San Juan and we are just planning na magbaktas ra ta or dili. No, it's either magbaktas ta or dili. So, if going to school from San Juan to Nemco, so, no, it's either, or for example, Nemco to San Juan, pauli na ka, tas magbaktas ra ka. And then, from that case, nagbaktas na ka sugod, tapos ning abot na ka sa Jollibee. And then, you realize na naade ay kay napilin sa Nemco. So, kanus aman nato mag-decide na, uy, mobalik ko sa Nemco or magpadayon na lang. So, that is where, when we can be able to identify the midpoint. Kung naana ba ta ng lapas na bata sa tunga or wala pa ta nakaabot sa katunga. If wala pa ta nakaabot sa katunga, no, sa ato gibaktas, pwede ta mo balik. Pero kung nalapas na ta, we should decide not to turn back. So, same with this airplane na if nakalapas na si Jazz sa midpoint, no, kuminta midpoint katunga, no, midpoint sa katunga sa distance, then we should decide to continue flying towards its final destination. But if wala pa, no, then we will turn back. So a plane flying between two cities cannot stop mid-air to ascertain its position. If you are the pilot and the plane gets some engine damage, will you go back or head on to the final destination? What factor would you consider in making a decision? So this is where the time that we should know kung asa ang midpoint sa kini na lugar. No, asa ang katunga sa distance nga atong gina-travel. So, in this lesson, we will also have to derive the distance formula. Still, we are in the distance formula na topic, but we are talking about the midpoint formula here. No, it's to identify the midpoint formula, we also have to know about the distance of the certain location. So our objectives here is to determine the coordinates of the midpoint of a line segment on a coordinate plane using the midpoint formula. Okay, the second one is for us to find the other endpoint of a line segment when the midpoint and one endpoint are given. And the third is appreciate the importance of the midpoint formula in making wise decisions. So we'll start with our discussion about the midpoint formula. So the example earlier is an example of identifying the midpoint of a certain distance. And we will be using a midpoint formula to identify the midpoint of that certain distance. So point M is called the midpoint. So if we have there big letter M, that is called our midpoint. And it divides line segment PQ into two equal parts. What does it mean? If we have a midpoint M, that means na si MQ is equal to the distance of MP. So again, if we have a midpoint, that only means that si MQ, the distance from M to Q is equal to the distance from M to P. And we have here the formula for the midpoint or in getting the coordinates of the midpoint. So that is just x sub 1, m is equal to x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. So, again, how do we get the midpoint? Simply, add na nato si x sub 1 og x sub 2 divided by 2, and y sub 1 and y sub 2 divided by 2. Then we can get the coordinates of our midpoint. So the x-coordinate of M is the average of the x-coordinates of P and Q, while the y-coordinate of M is the average of the y-coordinates of P and Q. So P and Q here are the endpoints of a line segment. Next, we'll have an example number 1. So example is that natay coordinate na of the endpoints of AB are 1 and negative 7 and 7, 4 respectively. So we have ang coordinates ni A kay kining si 1 and negative 7, si B kay kining si 7 and 4. Now we are looking for the coordinates of the midpoint M. So how do we find for the coordinates of the midpoint M? We will just simply use the formula. But we'll identify first that C1 is our x sub 1 and this is our y sub 1 negative 5. X sub 2 and y sub 2. So our x sub 1 is 1, y sub 1 is negative 5, x sub 2 is 7, and y sub 2 is 4. So ato lang ni siya ipangbutang sa ato mga sa ato formula. X sub 1 is, this is the formula for the midpoint, kini. No, and then, sorry, wait lang. Let me erase this. And then, after that, kay, we also have here the, ato lang i-substitute si kining mga values ni x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2 sa ato formula. So, our x sub 1 is 1 man, butang diri, x sub 2 is 7, y sub 1 is negative 5, y sub 2 is 4, divided by 2. So, 1 plus 7, that's 8, divided by 2, that's 8 over 2. And negative 5 plus 4, that is negative 1 divided by 2, that's negative 1 half. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So this is the coordinates of the midpoint of AB are 4 and negative. This is not negative 12. This is negative 1 over 2. This is negative 1 over 2. Nanay dahay ko ana. Next, for example number 2. If negative 1 and 2 is the midpoint of RJ, karon ang given kay naatay midpoint and one endpoint R has coordinates 7, negative 8. Now we will have to find for the coordinates of the other endpoint J. So how do we do this? We let x is equal to negative 1, y is equal to 2, and x sub 1 is equal to 7. And y sub 1 is equal to negative 8. Now substitute these values in the midpoint formula and equate the coordinates and then solve. So we have, again, how do we solve ba to find for the midpoint formula? Remember that our midpoint kay naa diri sa gawas. X, Y. No, this is M. Mo ni ang ato midpoint M. Ana M. So X, Y. And then, ang ato X sub 1 is negative 1. Ang ato Y sub 2, Y is 2. Pasabot, kining Y ra nato, mo ni ang ato midpoint na Y. And then, si X mo ni ang ato midpoint na negative 1. Then, this is our, isa sa ato mga endpoints. We have X sub 1 is equal to 7 and Y sub 1 is equal to negative 8. So, kining si midpoint, diri ni nato siya ibutang sa gawas. That's negative 1, 2 is equal to 7 plus X sub 2 over 2. And then, Ry is negative 8 plus Y over 2 over 2. So, ato siya i-separate si X o i-separate po nato si Y para ma-solve nato siya. So, again, we have here X is equal to X sub 1 plus X sub 2 over 2. And then, our midpoint is negative 1. Sa X niya, X coordinates. So, our X sub 1 is 7 plus X sub 2 divided by 2. So, ato i-cancel si 2. So, we will multiply both sides by 2. So, makancel ni diri sa kuan. And then, negative 1 times 2, that's negative 2. And then, we have is equal to 7 plus X. Nga to purpose, dapat ang mabilin sa right hand side is si x sub 2. So, ato i-transfer si negative 1 sa pikas, mahimo siyang positive 9. So, negative 2 plus positive 9, that is, si answer, negative 2, oh, di ay, sorry, si 7 di ay. Si 7, i-transfer na to siya sa pikas, mahimo siyang negative 7. So, we have negative 2 minus 7, the answer is negative 9. So, our x sub 2 is negative 9. Now, let's solve for the y coordinate. So, y is equal to y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Now, our midpoint for y coordinate is 2 and our y sub 1 is negative 8. Then, we will find for y sub 2 over 2. So, again, multiply both sides by 2. So, makansiling diri 2. Kaya multiplyan man nato 2. 2 times 2 becomes 4. And then, i-transfer na to si negative 8 sa pikas. Pero the right term is adding both sides by positive 8. No, so, pagbalis ni sa pikas, mahimong plus 8 or positive 8. So, 4 plus 8, that is 12. So, our mid or our j is equal to negative 9 and 12. Okay, for the last example. So, we have here, Strike and Cheska are having their vacation in 2 different islands in the Philippines as illustrated below. They decided to meet at a point halfway between their locations to save travel time. Find the exact coordinates of the midpoint between the 2 islands where they will meet. So, we have the first midpoint out. End point pala is negative 3 and 2. What is this? Negative 3 and 1. The second endpoint is 2 and negative 1. So, we will find for the midpoint. So, we have here our x sub 1 is negative 3. Our x sub 2 is 2. Our y sub 1 is 1. And our y sub 2 is negative 1. Divided by 2, divided by 2. So, negative 3 plus 2, that is negative 1 divided by 2, that is negative 1 over 2. 1 plus negative 1, that's 0 over 2. And our midpoint is negative 1 half and 0. Okay, this time, I need your coordination, no, in answering this. So, think quickly. Okay. Supply the missing parts of the solution. Find the midpoint M of a line segment whose endpoints are A, negative 3, 5, and F, 6, 1. So, ang atong gipangita diri is ang midpoint. Now, what is our x sub 2 here and y sub 2? Sama na to x sub 2. We have x sub 1 nato is negative 3. Y sub 1 is negative, positive 5. Ato x sub 2 kinsa man? Si 6. Our y sub 2 is 1. So, unsa may ato ibutang diri? This is y sub 1. No, y sub 1 ni, y sub 2, di na ko isuyat. And then, ato ibutang diri, kisa man si x sub 1, that is negative 3. No, isa mo suyat. Negative 3, diri kay si 6. No, and diri kay si, kisa man diri, si 5 and 1. Okay? Diretso ta sa answer. We have here 5 and 1. So, negative 3 plus 6, we have positive 3 over 2. And 5 plus 1 is 6 divided by 2. That's 3. So, our midpoint is 3 over 2 and 3. We'll proceed to the second one. The midpoint of a line segment is 4, 7. If one endpoint is negative 6, 9, what is the other endpoint? So, again, naatay given na midpoint, and then naaputay isa ka endpoint. So, we are looking for the other endpoint. So, how do we solve this? Okay, we have x is 4, 7. Pasabot mo niyang ato mga midpoint. X sub 1 is negative 6, y sub 1 is equal to 9. So, mo niyang formula na ato gamiton, tas ato sila ipang substitute here. And then, ato ibulag si x coordinate o ang y coordinate. So, for x, we have 4 here as our midpoint. And the x sub 1 is negative 6 plus x sub 2 over 2. So, multiply both sides by 2. That becomes, makancel ni si 2 here. 4 times 2 is 8. And then, i-transfer na to si negative 6 sa pikas. May mo siyang positive 6. So, 8 plus 6 is equal to 14. So, this is the answer. For y sub 2 naman, or y sub 2, so we have our midpoint is 7, and then 9 is our y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. So again, multiply both sides by 2. Makancel ni si 2, 7 times 2 kay 14. Si 9 ibal isa pikas mahimong negative 9. 14 minus 9 is equal to 5. So the other end point is 14, 5. Okay, so recall no, summary before ending this topic. So, what is midpoint formula? So, the midpoint formula is a formula that can be used to find the coordinates of the midpoint of a line segment on the coordinate plane. Now, what is the midpoint formula? So, we have here the midpoint formula. The midpoint of P, x1, y1, and q, x2, y2 is x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2 and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. And money ang ato midpoint formula. Okay, and that ends our discussion. Do you have any questions or clarifications?